The morning I received my diagnosis, I made two calls. The first was to Richard, my husband of 18 years, asking him to come home early. The second was to my lawyer, asking her to accelerate the property transfer we'd been discussing. I still remember how the doctor's words felt like ice water in my veins. Stage 2B invasive ductal carcinoma, breast cancer. Not a death sentence with modern medicine, but certainly life-altering. I needed my husband's support more than ever. What I got instead was a glimpse of who he truly was. Richard came home that evening, his expression already distant when I sat him down in our kitchen, the same kitchen we'd remodeled together 3 years ago. I'd prepared a small folder with the medical information, treatment options, and survival rates. I was frightened but determined. This was something we would face together, or so I thought. "I have breast cancer," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He didn't move toward me, didn't take my hand. He just stared at the folder, then at the wall behind me, and asked, "How bad is it?" That night, he slept in the guest room, claiming he needed to process everything. A week later, he was gone along with our joint savings of nearly $300,000. The note he left simply said, "I can't do this, Elaine. I'm sorry." What Richard didn't know was that I'd already put my contingency plan into motion. Because when you're married to someone for nearly 2 decades, you begin to see the cracks long before they become chasms. And those cracks had started showing years ago. I met Richard Donovan when I was 27 and he was 32. I was developing software for a healthcare startup. He was in real estate development with his father's company. We met at a charity auction where both our companies had donated services. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my work, a rarity among the men I dated. Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about programming. I told him over our first dinner. "I find it fascinating," he replied. "You build invisible architectures that make everything work. It's like what I do, but yours requires more intelligence." We were married within 2 years. Everyone said we were perfect together, the analytical software engineer and the charismatic businessman. His family welcomed me, particularly his father, who appreciated my straightforward nature. My parents were more reserved in their approval. "He's very charming," my mother said carefully. "Just make sure there's substance beneath it." The first decade of our marriage was good, or at least I thought it was. We worked hard, took luxurious vacations, and built a life in our beautiful colonial house in Connecticut. We decided not to have children. Richard was ambivalent, and I was consumed with my career. Instead, we became the perfect professional couple, successful, childless, with the freedom to pursue our ambitions. I made partner at my tech consulting firm by 35 and started earning more than Richard. He congratulated me, but something shifted. His father had retired, leaving Richard to run the family business alone, and he was struggling. Projects were delayed, costs overran, and clients were unhappy. While my career soared, his began to falter. "Maybe we should take a step back," I suggested when he came home stressed for the 3rd night that week. "Downsize the company. Focus on smaller projects until you find your footing." "I don't need to downsize," he snapped. "I need support, not criticism." I backed off, but the tension lingered. Increasingly, Richard stayed late at work, had dinners with clients, and grew distant. Sex became infrequent, then rare. When I brought it up, he blamed stress. It was around our 15th anniversary that I first suspected he was having an affair. A receipt for a women's scarf I never received. Late-night texts he'd quickly hide. Hotel charges in the city when he claimed to be visiting project sites. But I said nothing. Part of me didn't want confirmation. Another part was devising a strategy. Because while Richard's business continued to struggle, I was thriving. I had invested wisely over the years: tech stocks, property in emerging neighborhoods, angel investments in promising startups. My personal portfolio had grown substantially, carefully kept separate from our joint accounts. I'd always believed in financial independence, even within marriage. We lived primarily on Richard's income, with most of mine going into investments. "You're the saver, I'm the spender," he'd joke. It became our dynamic, and it suited us both. He maintained his pride as the provider, while I quietly built our real financial security. Our house was the crown jewel of our assets. We'd purchased it early in our marriage when property values in our area were still reasonable. Now, after 15 years of gentrification and improvements, it was worth nearly $1.8 million. It was in both our names initially, but as Richard's business faced more troubles, we discussed transferring it solely to my name to protect it from any potential business liabilities. However, something made me hesitate. Call it intuition or simply paying attention to the warning signs. I began to notice other concerning patterns beyond the suspected affair. Richard was becoming careless with our finances, expensive purchases he couldn't explain, missing statements, secretive phone calls with his accountant. So I hired a private investigator. Within 2 weeks, I had all the evidence I needed. Richard wasn't just having an affair, he was having one with Vanessa Weber, the much younger office manager at his company. And they weren't just sleeping together, they were planning a future. The PI provided photos of them house hunting, screenshots of emails discussing after we're together, and most damning of all, a consultation with a divorce attorney. It was clear that Richard was preparing to leave me. But after nearly 2 decades together, he wasn't just walking away, he was strategizing to take as much as he could. I made an appointment with my own lawyer the next day. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, she explained. That doesn't mean equal, it means fair, based on multiple factors including income contribution, future earning potential, and fault. Fault like having an affair? I asked. That can be considered, yes. But these cases get messy and expensive. If he's already consulted counsel, he's probably been advised to start moving assets. That night, I checked our joint accounts and discovered that small amounts had indeed been transferred out over the past several months. Nothing dramatic enough to raise immediate alarms, but consistent like a slow financial bleed. What are my options? I asked my lawyer at our next meeting. We can file immediately. Get temporary orders to freeze accounts. Standard procedure. And what about the house? I asked. Since it's in both your names, it would likely be considered marital property subject to division, regardless of who contributed more. What if it were just in his name? She looked at me curiously. That would potentially make it his separate property, but there are ways to argue it's still marital, especially if you've contributed to mortgage payments or improvements. But it would complicate things. Make it less straightforward? Yes, it could. But why would you want to put the house solely in his name? That seems contrary to protecting your interests. I smiled. Sometimes protection takes unexpected forms. Over the next few months, I orchestrated a careful plan. First, I suggested to Richard that we should transfer the house entirely to his name. Your dad's company is stabilizing now, and my firm is going through some restructuring. It makes sense to protect our biggest asset from my professional liability. He agreed almost too eagerly. Meanwhile, I meticulously documented all our finances, copying statements, tracking his withdrawals, and gathering evidence of his affair, not for a divorce filing, but for leverage if needed. What Richard failed to realize was that our property taxes hadn't been properly paid for the last 3 years. I had discovered this accidentally at first, a notice that came while he was on a business trip with Vanessa. Rather than addressing it immediately, I began to investigate and found that Richard had been skimming from the account we set aside for property taxes, likely to cover business expenses or fund his affair. The deficit had grown to over $420,000 with penalties and interest. I had been quietly negotiating with the tax office, keeping the mounting debt at bay with minimal payments while promising a full resolution soon. They were accommodating because of our property value and my apparent cooperation. But I never told Richard, and when we transferred the house to his name, the entire tax liability went with it. Then came my diagnosis. The first sign something was wrong appeared during my regular self-exam, a small, hard lump that hadn't been there before. I scheduled a mammogram immediately, followed by an ultrasound and biopsy. The entire time, Richard was too busy to accompany me. When the diagnosis came back as stage 2B invasive ductal carcinoma, I sat alone in the doctor's office, listening to treatment options and survival rates. That was the day everything changed, not just because of the cancer, but because I finally saw with perfect clarity what I needed to do. After Richard left, taking our joint savings and leaving me with the shocking betrayal of abandonment during my most vulnerable moment, I gave myself exactly 1 day to fall apart. I cried, screamed into pillows, and broke a set of plates we'd received as wedding gifts. Then I pulled myself together and activated the second phase of my plan. First, I called my oncologist and scheduled my treatments. Then I called my lawyer. He's gone, I told her. Took our savings and moved in with his girlfriend. I'm so sorry, Elaine, she said. Do you want to file for divorce immediately? Not yet, I replied. There's something else I need to handle first. I explained about my cancer diagnosis and treatment plan. I need to focus on my health right now. The divorce can wait. What I didn't tell her was that I was also waiting for the tax bomb to drop. 3 weeks after Richard left, I received my first chemotherapy treatment. My sister flew in from Oregon to stay with me, and several friends organized a rotation of support, driving me to appointments, bringing meals, keeping me company during the worst days of nausea and fatigue. Richard never called, not once. From my friends still connected to his social circle, I learned he had moved in with Vanessa and was telling everyone I had been mentally unstable for years. According to him, the cancer was unfortunate timing, but he couldn't set himself on fire to keep someone else warm. He was painting himself as the victim who had finally escaped a toxic relationship. I focused on my treatment and recovery, drawing strength from my support network and the knowledge of what was coming for Richard. During this time, I also secured my remaining assets, opened new accounts at different banks, and prepared financially for the battle ahead. 2 months into my chemotherapy, it happened. The county tax assessor's office, tired of partial payments and unfulfilled promises, placed a lien on the property and initiated foreclosure proceedings. The official notices were sent to the property owner of record, Richard Donovan. I was sitting in the oncology ward receiving my 3rd treatment when he called, his voice a mixture of panic and rage. What the hell is this tax bill? $427,000? How is this possible? I kept my voice calm. Oh, that. Yes, there have been some issues with the property taxes. Some issues. This says they're putting a lien on the house. Why didn't you tell me? I tried to discuss our finances many times over the years, Richard. You always said you had it under control. This is your fault, he hissed. You transferred the house to trap me with this debt. No, Richard. The debt existed whether the house was in my name, your name, or both our names. The difference is, now it's your legal responsibility since you're the sole owner. Just like abandoning your wife of 18 years during cancer treatment was your choice. He was quiet for a moment. You knew about the taxes when we transferred the property. I knew many things, Richard. About the taxes, about Vanessa, about the money you've been slowly siphoning from our accounts for the past year. I'll fight this, he threatened. I'll claim fraud, that you tricked me into taking the house. I laughed softly. With what evidence? We have emails discussing the transfer, documentation of your agreement, even your signature on forms stating you understood all liabilities associated with the property. Your father built a real estate company. A judge would find it hard to believe you didn't understand basic property ownership concepts. You vindictive bitch, he spat. Is this because of Vanessa? No, I said calmly as a nurse adjusted my fore. This is because when I told you I had cancer, you didn't hold me. You didn't promise we'd get through it together. You calculated how quickly you could leave. And then you stole from me and abandoned me when I needed you most. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. You have options, I continued. You can sell the house and pay the tax debt. You can try to negotiate with the county, or you can let it go to foreclosure, but that will destroy your credit and possibly result in the remaining debt being assigned to you personally anyway. I suggest consulting a financial advisor. You expect me to clean up your mess? It wasn't my mess, Richard. It was ours. But now, like everything else, you've made it entirely yours. I hung up and closed my eyes, letting the chemotherapy drugs flow through my veins, fighting the cancer that had revealed the cancer in my marriage. The next few weeks brought a flurry of legal threats. Richard's lawyer, a pompous man with an overpriced suit and underdeveloped ethics, sent formal letters claiming I had committed fraud and demanding I take responsibility for the tax debt. My lawyer responded with meticulous documentation of Richard's financial mismanagement, including bank records showing his systematic diversion of funds from our tax account. Meanwhile, my cancer treatment continued. I lost my hair, dropped 20 pounds, and spent days too exhausted to leave my bed. But with each treatment, both the tumor and my attachment to my old life shrank. I was building something new, a future based on honesty and strength rather than comfortable illusions. Richard tried a different approach after his legal threats failed. He showed up at my house one evening, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "You look terrible," he said when I opened the door, eyeing my scarf-covered head and thin frame. "Cancer will do that," I replied, not inviting him in. "What do you want?" "To talk sensibly," he said. "We were married for 18 years, Elaine. We shouldn't let things end like this. Surely we can come to some arrangement about the house and taxes." I leaned against the doorframe, conserving my energy. "What kind of arrangement did you have in mind? You know I can't pay that tax bill. My business is struggling, and this could ruin me." "Yes," I agreed. "It could." His face hardened. "Is that what you want? To destroy everything I've built?" "What I wanted was a husband who wouldn't abandon me when I got sick. What I wanted was honesty instead of betrayal. What I wanted was to grow old with someone who loved me enough to honor his vows." "People fall out of love, Elaine," he said defensively. "It happens all the time." "Yes, it does. But decent people have difficult conversations. They don't steal money and disappear with a note." He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. "I handled it badly. I admit that. But this tax situation is extreme. You're punishing me." "No, Richard. This isn't punishment, it's consequence. You chose to neglect our tax obligations for years. You chose to put that money elsewhere. The fact that the bill came due after you left is just unfortunate timing for you." "I'll lose everything," he said, a note of desperation entering his voice. "The business is barely staying afloat. I can't get another mortgage with this lien." "That sounds difficult," I acknowledged. "Almost as difficult as fighting cancer alone while dealing with financial betrayal." His facade cracked then, anger breaking through. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Setting this trap, playing the victim?" I straightened up despite my fatigue. "I didn't set a trap, Richard. I simply stopped shielding you from your own decisions. That's the difference between us. I was willing to face reality, even when it was painful. You're still looking for someone else to blame. Vanessa was right about you," he sneered, cold and calculating beneath that professional exterior. "Vanessa doesn't know me," I replied calmly. "Neither did you, apparently." I closed the door on his protests, returned to my couch, and picked up the book my sister had left for me, a memoir by a cancer survivor. Outside, I heard Richard's car door slam and his engine rev as he drove away. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visit from someone I hadn't seen in years, Richard's father, Howard Donovan. Howard was in his 70s now, his once imposing frame slightly stooped with age, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He had built his real estate business from nothing, weathered multiple market crashes, and maintained a reputation for tough but honest dealings. He had always treated me with respect, even affection. "I heard about your diagnosis," he said as I served him tea in my living room. "And about Richard leaving. I wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm getting through it," I said. "The prognosis is good." He nodded, studying my face. "And the other situation? The tax issue with the house? So that was why he had come. Richard told you his version, I assume." Howard sighed. "He claims you tricked him, hid the tax problem until after the transfer. And what do you think, Howard? I think my son has been making poor decisions for quite some time," he said bluntly, "both in business and in his personal life." I felt a wave of unexpected emotion at having my experience validated by someone who had known Richard his entire life. "The tax issue didn't appear overnight," I explained. "It accumulated over years because funds that should have gone to taxes were diverted elsewhere. I discovered it relatively recently myself." "And you didn't address it immediately?" "I was making small payments, negotiating with the county. I planned to resolve it, but then you got sick, and Richard showed his true colors," Howard finished. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Howard set down his teacup with a decisive click. "My son has disappointed me deeply, Elaine, leaving you at such a time. It's unconscionable." "Thank you for saying that." I whispered. As for the house and taxes, he continued. Richard made his bed. The property was transferred legally, with proper documentation. If he didn't do his due diligence, that's on him. I was surprised by his position. He's your son. Yes. And I love him. But I've never believed in shielding people from the consequences of their actions. That's how they learn. He paused. Though I doubt Richard will learn from this. He's always found someone else to blame. After Howard left, promising to stay in touch regarding my recovery, I received a text from Richard. Using my father against me now? You'll regret this. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A week later, my lawyer called with news. Richard had listed the house for sale, pricing it well below market value for a quick sale. At the same time, she'd heard through professional channels that he and Vanessa had put an offer on a house in Florida, a state with strong homestead exemption laws that protect primary residences from many creditors. He's trying to unload the house, pay just enough of the tax debt to clear the lien, and run to Florida with whatever remains, my lawyer explained. Classic attempt to shield assets. Can he do that? I asked. Not effectively. The IRS and state tax authorities have ways of pursuing debts across state lines. Plus, if he sells below market value just to quickly convert the asset to cash, they could challenge it as a fraudulent transfer. 2 days later, I received divorce papers. Richard was filing on grounds of irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, making no mention of his affair. The filing included demands for half of my retirement accounts and investment portfolio. My lawyer was unconcerned. This is standard opening position. He's hoping you'll settle quickly due to your health situation, and if I don't, then we counterclaim with abandonment and adultery, submit evidence of his financial misconduct, and request additional support due to your medical condition. I thought about it overnight. Fighting a prolonged divorce battle while undergoing cancer treatment wasn't appealing, but neither was allowing Richard to profit from his betrayal. I instructed my lawyer to proceed with the counterclaim, but to also propose a settlement option. Richard would keep whatever remained from the house sale after paying the tax debt in full. I would keep all my separate assets and retirement accounts, and we would both waive any future claims against each other. Richard rejected the offer immediately. He says you're trying to rob him of his rightful share of the marital assets, my lawyer reported. Interesting perspective from someone who emptied our joint accounts and abandoned me during cancer treatment, I replied. The house sold within 3 weeks for $1.65 million, about $150,000 below market value, but still substantial. The tax debt, with all penalties and interest, consumed $427,000. The remaining proceeds were held in escrow pending resolution of our divorce. It was around this time that I completed my chemotherapy treatments. My oncologist was optimistic the tumor had shrunk significantly, and the next step would be surgery followed by radiation. My prognosis was good, with an 85% chance of full recovery. As I was leaving my final chemotherapy session, I received an unexpected call from Vanessa Weber. I want to meet, she said without preamble. I don't think we have anything to discuss, I replied. It's about Richard, she insisted. There are things you should know. Curiosity won out. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe the next afternoon. Vanessa was younger than me, early 30s at most, with the kind of polished beauty that requires considerable effort to maintain. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her coffee cup as I sat down across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. I know this is unconventional. What did you want to tell me about Richard? I asked, too tired for small talk. She took a deep breath. We're not together anymore. I ended it last week. This was unexpected. I'm not sure how that concerns me. It does because of why I ended it. She looked down at her hands. When Richard first pursued me, he painted your marriage as loveless, claimed you were cold and career obsessed. He said you'd grown apart years ago but stayed together out of convenience. It was the classic script of the unfaithful spouse. And you believed him. Yes, she admitted, but then you got sick, and he just left. No discussion, no attempt to work things out. He just calculated the benefits of staying versus leaving and made a decision. That's who he is, I said simply. I'm starting to see that. She hesitated. There's more. When the tax issue emerged, He became obsessed with finding ways to hide money from you and the authorities. He's been moving funds offshore, talking about establishing residency in Florida to protect assets. This wasn't particularly surprising, but her next revelation was, last week, I found him transferring money from my personal savings into one of these accounts over $30,000, without my knowledge or permission. Now I understood why she had left him. He stole from you. She nodded, blinking back tears. When I confronted him, he said it was temporary, that he needed it to secure our future. But I realized in that moment that he would always prioritize himself over anyone else. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're dealing with in this divorce. He's hiding assets, Elaine. Significant ones, including money he diverted from his company over the years. She pulled out a USB drive and slid it across the table. Bank statements, account numbers, transfer records. Everything I could download before I left. I stared at the small device. Why would you do this? Because what he did to you was wrong. Because I became complicit in hurting someone who was already suffering. Because my mother died of breast cancer when I was 16, and watching him abandon you during treatment made me sick to my stomach. Her voice broke. Mostly because it's the right thing to do. I picked up the USB drive. Thank you. She stood to leave. I hope you recover fully, Elaine. I truly do. After she left, I immediately called my lawyer and arranged to deliver the USB drive. The information Vanessa provided was explosive evidence of systematic financial misconduct extending back years, including corporate funds Richard had diverted to personal use. Armed with this new evidence, my lawyer filed an emergency motion to freeze all identified assets and amend our divorce complaint to include claims of financial fraud. The judge granted the freeze order within 48 hours. Richard called me apoplectic. What the hell have you done? My accounts are frozen. Not me. Richard, I said calmly. Vanessa. His sharp intake of breath told me everything. She has no idea what she's talking about. The banking records suggest otherwise, as do the offshore accounts. Did you really think you'd get away with it? This is harassment, he sputtered. My lawyer will. Your lawyer might want to advise you on the penalties for financial fraud and tax evasion. I interrupted. They're quite severe. The line went quiet for a moment. What do you want? He finally asked. Exactly what I proposed before. You keep whatever remains from the house sale after taxes. I keep my separate assets. And we part ways completely. And the frozen accounts. Those funds appear to include money improperly diverted from your company. They'll likely be subject to investigation regardless of our divorce settlement. He was silent again. Longer this time. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing options, looking for an angle. I need time to consider, he finally said. Take all the time you need, I replied. I've learned to be patient. 3 days later, Richard's lawyer contacted mine with an acceptance of my settlement terms, along with a request that I not pursue any further claims related to financial misconduct. He's scared, my lawyer observed. He knows the evidence is damning. I'm not interested in pursuing criminal charges, I said. I just want to end this chapter of my life. We finalized the divorce settlement within weeks record time for such proceedings. I kept my retirement accounts, investments, and personal assets. Richard kept the approximately $1.2 million remaining from the house sale after the tax debt was paid. We both waived any future claims against each other. What Richard didn't know was that the IRS had been notified about the potential financial improprieties revealed in Vanessa's documents. While I had no interest in pursuing the matter, tax authorities operate independently. Their investigation was already underway. The day our divorce was finalized, I underwent surgery to remove the remaining cancer tissue. The procedure was successful, with clean margins and no evidence the cancer had spread to my lymph nodes. I would still need radiation therapy, but my doctors were increasingly optimistic about my prognosis. As I recovered in the hospital, I received flowers from Howard Donovan with a note, wishing you healing and strength. Sometimes endings are necessary for new beginnings. 6 weeks later, as I was completing my radiation treatments, I learned through mutual acquaintances that Richard had indeed moved to Florida. He had purchased a modest house in a gated community near Tampa, a significant step down from our Connecticut home, but still comfortable. Then, Just as I was starting to truly move forward, I received an unexpected email from Richard. Elaine, I heard your treatment is going well. I'm glad. You probably know I've relocated to Florida. What you may not know is that the IRS has frozen all my remaining assets pending an investigation into financial irregularities. They're talking about tax fraud charges, possibly even criminal proceedings. I don't expect sympathy from you, but I want you to know that I recognize my mistakes, not just financial ones. Walking away when you needed me most was the act of a coward. I've had to face that truth about myself. Vanessa left because she saw who I really am. My father barely speaks to me. The business I inherited is in ruins. Everything I thought defined me is gone. You won, Elaine. Completely. Richard, I sat with the email open on my screen for a long time, contemplating how to respond, or whether to respond at all. Finally, I wrote, Richard, this was never about winning. It was about justice and facing reality. I didn't contact the heirs. They must have received information from another source. Whatever happens with their investigation is between you and them. I don't take pleasure in your difficulties, but I also don't regret holding you accountable for your choices. Every step that led you here was the result of your own decisions. My cancer is in remission. I'm rebuilding my life without the foundation of lies our marriage became. It's harder, but healthier. I sincerely hope you find a way forward that includes honesty with yourself first, then with others. Elaine, I hit send and closed my laptop. Outside my window, spring had arrived, bringing new growth to the small garden I'd planted after finishing radiation. My hair was growing back darker and curlier than before. My body was different, marked by surgery and treatment, but resilient. 3 months later, I accepted a partnership offer from a different tech firm, one that valued my experience and resilience. I sold my condo and purchased a small house near the coast, a place I'd always wanted to live, but Richard had resisted. I learned through Howard, who had become something of a father figure to me, that Richard had indeed faced serious consequences for his financial misdeeds. The IRS investigation had uncovered years of tax evasion and fraudulent reporting. He was facing significant penalties, the loss of most of his remaining assets, and possible criminal charges. He's finally facing himself, Howard told me during one of our monthly lunches. It's painful but necessary. Do you think he'll change? I asked. Howard considered this. People can change when the cost of remaining the same becomes too high. For Richard, that point may have finally arrived. I didn't wish Richard ill, but I also didn't wish to have him in my life in any capacity. Our chapter was closed. Whatever growth or consequences awaited him were his to navigate alone. On the 1-year anniversary of my diagnosis, now cancer-free according to my latest scans, I took a solo trip to the Amalfi Coast, a dream destination I'd always postponed. Sitting on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, I opened my journal and wrote, in losing what I thought I had, I discovered what I actually needed. In facing mortality, I found the courage to live more authentically. There's a strange grace in having illusions stripped away, painful as it is. It creates space for truth. Richard's betrayal and the cancer arrived almost simultaneously, twin catastrophes that might have destroyed me. Instead, they revealed my strength. They taught me that some losses are actually releases, and some endings are necessary beginnings. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'll face it with clear eyes and an open heart. No more comfortable lies. No more false security. Sometimes the most valuable thing we can lose is the life we thought we wanted. I closed the journal and watched the sun set over the water, casting gold across the surface. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, and for the first time in years, I was truly ready for them.